Alright, so I just picked up this bike off of Facebook Marketplace, and it's a 24-inch wheel. It's called the Fuji Ace, and it's an older model. It's probably at least about 10 years old. Problem is, you cannot really find these road bikes for kids very easily, and people ask a lot of money for them. Alright, we're going to start by cutting off the tape off the handlebar and start removing the brakes. So I opted to use these riser bars that I found on Amazon. They're carbon riser bars. They were just a little easier for my daughter to handle than the drop bars. Then I went ahead and cleaned up the brakes. The little adjuster that pulls the caliper in and out as you need to remove the wheel or to adjust the tension on the brakes. It was sticky, so I cleaned that, took it apart and lubed it up. Rear wheel doesn't seem to spin very long on its own, so you give it a push and it pretty quickly comes to a stop, versus this front wheel's been spinning for like a minute. So you spin that one and spin this one, and you can see just how much longer that front one spins. The back one's already stopped. Alright, so now we got the wheel off. And from what I understand, you gotta hold this and hold that and twist them apart. So I'm gonna go ahead and clean all this up. So cleaning up all these bearings, actually, it took a long time. It's just hard to get those clean. I wish I had an ultrasonic cleaner for this part, but I didn't. So I just washed them in some degreaser over and over again, wiped them off, and kept repeating the process until they came out nice and shiny and clean, smooth. Once I was happy with the way the bearings turned out, I just needed to clean the axle and put it all back together. Since this was my first time rebuilding a bearing wheel on a bicycle, it took me kind of a few minutes to kind of figure things out, how to put it back together, and I don't really show all the trial and error, but I just kind of struggled a little bit. It wasn't perfectly intuitive, but it wasn't really complicated either. So I think the first time I put the axle in on the wrong side, so the wheel was rotating the opposite direction than the tire was designed to, so I had to kind of just take it back out and put it back in again, the other side. Other than that, it was pretty straightforward, and the parts were in good shape. There wasn't any damage to the axle. I didn't see any damage to the bearings, so I was happy with just doing this rebuild process with the existing parts. It was just dried out and old, but I don't think it had a lot of miles on it. So here's just testing the wheel, making sure it spins nice and smooth, that the bearing aren't over tightened on the axle, and yeah, it was good. That's a lot smoother right there. While we're at it, I might as well go ahead and watch this cassette. Yeah, let's clean the chain next. See if we can get that rust off of there. I'm going to soak it in some rust cleaner, rust remover, vapor rust in there. So this evapor rust is really good for taking rust off. It kind of discolors a little bit the metal. It kind of darkens it, but it's fine. It gets all the rust off of there really well, better than you could just do by hand. So I also soaked all the other parts that I had off the bike just while I was at it. So then I decided to go ahead and just clean up the derailleur, take it all apart, clean out any grease and dirt that was in our rings, and it turned out pretty clean. I was happy I cleaned it out. It's nice to have a nice clean drivetrain, and of course this is really the lowest end of Shimano rear derailleur, but I just didn't want to invest more in a derailleur because this is a child's bike and really isn't going to get ridden that much. It's something I could always upgrade later. Wanted to just do the best I could with a really small budget. Then I moved on and started scrubbing the wheels, and I just used a Scotch-Brite pad to get all the grime, and you can see the difference between the old one and the clean one. It's a pretty dramatic difference what it did to the aluminum. Aluminum was pretty easy to clean with that Scotch-Brite, and I just used some metal cleaner that I had. It's kind of like a paste that you just rub on there. I went ahead and cleaned the spindle area, and I was really happy with the way the wheels turned out. The wheels looked a lot better, a lot shinier, cleaner. So it kind of just made the bike look a lot better with that. And then of course, you can see how I'm taking off all the stickers with a heat gun because they were just really worn out from the brake. They're kind of like on the braking surface. So yeah, here's the process up close, just using a heat gun to remove those decals. I would have left the decals on if they weren't torn because they look kind of cool, but it looks good too, just plain shiny aluminum. So this is pretty much, I cleaned every single spoke, I cleaned the spindle area and the inside with the toothbrush and some of that metal cleaner that I had on hand. And I think it turned out really well. I was happy with the way this bike cleaned up. It was a pretty dirty bike when I got it. So yeah. So then here we are just moving onto the brakes. They were just a little bit out of adjustment, so I wanted to get them perfectly lined up so that they didn't rub on the tire, and so they just rubbed right perfectly on that braking pad surface. So spent a few minutes just getting them lined up, dialed in, and so that the brakes are nice and tight when she wants to stop. So the brakes cleaned up really well. I thought they looked good. So I went ahead and removed the old cranks, and I had never done this before, so I was kind of a little bit in the dark. I got this tool off of Amazon. Of course, it's to press out that front sprocket assembly off the pedal bracket. So I got it all apart, but I don't really show it, but this was really challenging. It took a lot of force. I mean, those square taper pedals were on there really tight. So I fought it and I fought it and I fought it. Finally got it loose, but it was a bear. I'm not gonna lie. So once I had the the cranks out of the way, and I went ahead and decided to go ahead and clean that area really well. And while I was at it, just clean all of the frame. And what I used was just some soapy water, nothing fancy, just some like car wash soap. And then I used some sponge pads that were I think they were like 1200 to 2000 grit sandpaper pads. They're for wet sanding. And I basically just wet sanded all of this, a lot of dried up grease and dirt that was just kicked on there. It wouldn't wipe off with a microfiber towel. I had to do something more aggressive. And so I took these different grits, wet sanding sponges, and they worked really well because they can kind of form around the frame as you rub around it, and it totally took off all of that built up dirt. Here I am removing some stickers. I'm just using some goof off spray for that, and just continuing on, just cleaning the frame. Just wanted to get it nice and clean, make it look, pretty close to new again. Obviously I'm not going to fill in the scratches or anything like that, but just getting all of that dirt and grime off there just made it look really nice. So spent a good bit of time just doing that. Now here we are moving on to the front logo. I thought it'd be kind of cool to see if we could kind of clean this logo up, and it turned out okay, but you'll see here I tried to polish it. It's pretty scratched, and the top of it was all bent down, so I took a pick and tried to straighten out that little crown on the top of the logo. So I spent some good time on that too, just for fun. I just thought it might be kind of neat to see if I could polish it up and make it look better, and it did look better. I thought it cleaned up pretty well. I did put a little scratch in it, which was really unfortunate, so I tried to buff it back out, and it did kind of come out, which was good. And got it as shiny as I could, cleaned up around it. I did take off that Made in China sticker there, and I thought that headset area looked a lot better than before once I cleaned it all up. And that always makes a bike look nice when you have a nice clean headset area. So here I am, just going around the frame, the rest of the frame. There was a lot of stickers on this bike. It was obviously owned by a child, and they were just putting stickers all over the bike. So then I just moved on to the front fork and that brake, take it apart. A lot of this bike was well used. You can tell. I mean, they literally have like brake dust and rubber from the wheel or from the tire that landed on the fork. So this bike was pretty well used actually. By a kid, and so it did need a lot of cleanup, a lot of tune-up, and just got everything all cleaned up around the brake area. Had to fight to get that out of there. This is the one of the cable housing routings probably for the rear or probably the front derailleur, I believe. Clean off this seat clamp area and try to clean up that seat clamp as much as possible. I spent a good amount of time trying to clean up that seat post clamp. I'm just going to super hyper speed that part. There was of course another sticker on the actual clamp for the seat clamp, so I had to rub that off. And I tried to polish that brass looking piece, but it was just kind of like a coating of paint, so it really didn't clean up. If anything, it probably was just about to take that brass colored paint off of there, copper colored paint. So, but I still was able to get it, at least all the dirt and grime off it. It did look nice when it was done. And here's just the front brake, just doing final adjustments, getting the pads perfectly lined up, just right where they need to be. So it hits to the braking surface and nothing else. So here's the new, I bought a new set of cranks, and I decided to try to reuse the metal sprocket. Although this crank set I bought, it actually came with a narrow wide sprocket, and I do eventually put the narrow wide on there because I was having problems with the chain falling off of this off that middle sprocket that came with the bike. Because it was supposed to, I was removed the front derailleur. I wanted it to be just a single speed in the front crank. Here's the pedals going back on. Did my best to clean those up, and the seat clamp going back on. I had purchased the seat, but I liked the original seat better, so I put the original seat back on. It was actually a child's size. It was more comfortable, and I thought the black looked really nice, and it had no tears or rips in it. It cleaned up really well. So here's kind of a final review of what we put on. We put on a new brake levers, the carbon bars, a nice soft set of grips, and you can see just how well this bike cleaned up. So I was really happy with the way it looked and the way it turned out. For being as old and well used as it was, it cleaned up really quite well. So after that, we went ahead and just I wanted to weigh all of the old parts that I took out, and of course a lot of these got replaced with parts that are probably not as heavy as these, but there was a lot of weight that came off of the bike, and so this was just demonstrating how much came off and how much it weighed. And when I get everything in the box, it comes out to about 4 pounds. That stem was really heavy. It's like steel. It's literally a steel stem, so I replaced that as well with alloy. Those are the old shifters. They actually work pretty well, but They're not as good as a trigger shifter with it, you know, index trigger shifter. So we have 4 pounds, 11.7 ounces. So close to 5 pounds worth of stuff that we replaced with much lighter or eliminated completely. That's it. That's the bike. So much improved, and I think it should be a nice, quick bike for the kids to do their duathlon this spring.